So it's coming towards the end of the year, and I've been promoting and encouraging people to reflect. And that's what we do here in these monthly meetings. Share a few words just to offer an opportunity for us to reflect. And as some of you, as you may well know already, I recently was married and I've entered into married life. And as a consequence of that, I suppose, along with other things, I was reflecting on the relationship between Purusha and prakriti, this marital relationship, this romance. And through the teachings of Samkhya philosophy, as they're expressed through the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, we are encouraged to emphasize our relationship with Purusha, the seer, almost to the point that prakriti is demonized as being the one that's luring us in and causing us to get caught up and tripping over ourselves. And I was reflecting on it in relation to a romantic relationship, where one person is seen as the good person within the relationship and the other person is seen as the one causing all the issues. And we'll be used to watching this in TV programs and movies and different things. And so the term that's often used and thrown about is Maya, that we're all experiencing Maya, this delusion, as a consequence of identifying with the processes of nature due to the acts and the doings of prakriti. We've all fallen into her grasp, and now we're experiencing this hell-like state of Maya. And so our only way to liberation, Kavalya, is to give it up, to renounce it, and to do so in what can seem like quite an aggressive way, a very rigorous way, so that we can show our ties and our commitment to Purusha. Because after all, that's all that really exists, is the Purusha, isn't it? So we look at this in relation to our experience of life. We're endeavoring to experience our essential nature as the seer, as the Purusha. So it raises the question, are we supposed to just give up prakriti? Is prakriti worthless, non-relevant? Now, having entered into married life, I can safely say that to consider my partner as irrelevant would lead to all kinds of issues. And it's just something I don't want to do. And I think we come up against this conundrum in our practice because we are faced with the dilemma of, well, if that's the case, I kind of like life. It's not all that bad. It's not all that hellish. And why the characteristics of life, the inherent experience in everything is duality. And so with that duality, there's a tension. And that tension is often a suffering. And that can't be refuted. That is part of the experience of living within a dual nature. But there's beauty as a consequence of that too. And so for Purusha, that strong hero in this romantic drama, what value is there to Purusha without prakriti? What kind of man could he be if he wasn't supported and accompanied by his other half or other part, or woman is what I want to say. So if Purusha goes out of his way to just annihilate or negate or remove prakriti from his life, what is he then? Now we're talking about this in story mode, but this comes right back to our practice. If our sole concern is experiencing Purusha to the point where we may at times condemn and criticize prakriti and the forces which allow prakriti to express the gunas, if we're so insistent on reneging them and perhaps, depending on our language and our thinking and how we engage in it, to criticizing it and making it the issue, what does that mean then for us in terms of how we experience ourselves? If we're endeavoring to experience ourselves as the Purusha, the seer, how do we experience ourselves as the Purusha, the seer, if that which gives its credibility is its partner, prakriti? So, I suppose, in other words, outside of the relationship, who's Purusha? And bringing it back again to our experience of living, we are experiencing a dual-natured experience. And Samkhya philosophy promotes dualism. It does go on to say that Purusha can then be experienced as being non-dual at a certain point. And this is kind of, I suppose, experiential. When you go through the evolutes and you work back through the processes of prakriti as it unfolds, and then you still the gunas, and so the prakriti has become mirror-like and then reflects back the Purusha. There's maybe, in this way, a capacity to talk about the two becoming one. So is our engaging in our practices, our formal practices, which are very much an attempt to disengage with the sense faculties, the different means for us to engage in life, the goings on of nature and how it unfolds. Our meditation is aiming and giving us a space to do that, so that we get to a space where prakriti becomes still. Does it stop existing? Does she die? And then we're left with a bigger question. Because if she dies, how do we experience Purusha? And in our meditation practice, we are able to experience the Purusha as it's reflected back through a chitta, which has been neutralized. When the chitta, which is an aspect of prakriti, is not there, how does Purusha look at itself? How does it see itself? So getting back to the romantic relationship, we have friends and family and people that we can see ourselves as a consequence of the relationship we have with those people. They reflect back, they give us feedback, they let us know who we are. And in our meditation practice, we're endeavoring to neutralize the forces of nature so that they're still, so that in that then we're able to have a reflection of ourselves as the one that is observing, seeing. So getting back to the question, if prakriti is done away with, what happens to Purusha? Because in death, as we know, prakriti is done away with. As we know. Now there's capacity to talk about prakriti in terms of more subtle levels. But for most people, that's not what's experienced. What's experienced is the physical, the energetic or emotional, and the mental. In our process of moving through the evolutes of prakriti, we are sharpening our minds so that we may experience the vibrational force of nature, the different ways in which nature expresses, the gunas express at very subtle levels. And we may encounter these or become cognizant of them in our meditation practice. These things are just lights or maybe the movement of shapes, or some people might experience it as just a disassociation with the physical form, and all these different things that can happen, which are more subtle levels of prakriti. But we're still engaging with prakriti. And so then the idea that Purusha is experienced in relation to prakriti. What happens when prakriti goes? Now I'm going to bring in another romantic couple here just to shake things up a little bit and help us to reflect on this a little bit more. Because as yoga practitioners, we are guided by the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which was reliant on Samkhya philosophy. Within the second book, it's outlined what Kriya Yoga is. And we're given the three pillars which form Kriya Yoga, which you're aware of: self-discipline, self-study, and surrender. But Kriya Yoga incorporates many different practices from Tantric Yoga and the Tantric tradition. Patanjali doesn't get into this. The Tantric tradition, their romantic couple is Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva and Shakti, as an ideology, when it's compared to Purusha and Prakriti, is almost the opposite. You might be familiar with the term Leela. Leela being the play of life. So no longer a hellish experience. Now it's a divine play. And as Paramahansayogananda expressed it in his song, well, he translated it, Radha Govinda Jai, spirit and nature dancing together. And so for a Shivite or somebody who's following this ideology, this couple is far more romantic. Shiva and Shakti, they like to get on. They like to have each other's back. Neither is considered to be the more important person in the relationship, or the one that should be prioritized. Shiva is the male and has the male characteristics, let's say, is considered to be unbound, undefinable, unconditioned, very similar to Purusha. But Shakti, sometimes referred to in modern terms as the divine feminine. But Shakti is the creative force, which isn't like Purusha and Prakriti, where Prakriti is numb and lifeless without the interplay with Purusha. Shakti is an expression on par with Shiva. It's just that it's an unfolding, definable expression. And so within the tantric tradition, Leela, this play, is something to be celebrated. And so Kriya Yoga takes practices from the tantric tradition. And we can see in how Paramahansayogananda teaches that he's been influenced by a lot of these ideologies. And even in his autobiography of a yogi, he talks about engaging in specific tantric practices. He talks about Divine Mother consistently. Divine Mother might be another way of talking about Shakti. So now, we've got two yogas. One yoga which is dual in its essence, but it can be said that when it's fully achieved, then the unification is experienced. But then you have Tantric Yoga, which right from the get-go says it's non-dual, because Shiva and Shakti are one. Now, I'm just presenting this here, not really to offer a solution of any kind, but just for us to reflect on how we engage in our practice. Royeugenedavis used to always say, if you want to know if you're going to be liberated in after life, know that you're liberated here, in this life. And I suppose that's good advice, because we don't know anything of what's going to come. And we have ideologies which have been shared with us. We have practices which have been proven, and which have been stood by the lineage of teachers that represent the tradition we're part of. And so there's faith, there's trust. But as we experience life on a day-to-day level, we can see it as Maya, and everything's delusion, or we can see it as Leela, and everything's a celebration. Or maybe it doesn't need to be so absolute. Maybe it can be a bit of both. But when we sit down to meditate, and we're engaging with these practices, is the idea then that we will someday just be abiding as Purusha and be floating in some kind of transcendental level above prakriti? Is that a reality that is possible? If we have the physical body, we have the physical faculties, we have the thinking mind, we have the capacity to use our willpower. If these are all aspects of prakriti, is it reasonable to think that we can abide as the seer and totally disregard all that prakriti has to offer? Or maybe we can understand it that by appreciating Purusha, by giving Purusha credit, by not ignoring Purusha, but endeavoring to establish a relationship with Purusha, then we can have a better relationship with his wife. Because if we only try to become friends with his wife, he might start to distrust us and our intentions. And then, if we talk about it in terms of Shiva and Shakti, They're more like the modern couple, where both are gregarious, social, outgoing kinds. And Shakti likes to party, and to invite everyone to the party. And in going to the party, you can get to know her partner, Shiva. He doesn't like to organize the party, but he's always present at the party. So there are two ideologies that we're working off. And the reflection is, how do we relate to them? Because they've been given to us. And what's interesting is that they are both aiming for the same thing, liberation. But they have opposing views. And this paradox helps us to not get too settled or comfortable with our practice, to have it all figured out, to have the answers, and to be comfortable in the methodological and continuation of our practices, that we are reflective. So when we sit to meditate, we engage in the process and we're moving through the evolutes, as it might be. That's a Samkhya practice. When we're engaging with Kriya Yoga pranayama, that's a tantric practice. Within the tantric tradition, there's talk of kundalini and the raising of the shakti energy up to sushumna. And there's a whole model for understanding the human condition, which includes shakti, includes kundalini, includes the chakras. It's a model and a map to help navigate what's being experienced. And that map might be compared to the map offered in Sankhya, which is the processes of cosmic manifestation, where they're working back from the sense organs and sense faculties up towards manas and ahamkara and into chitta, and the working back up is similar to the rising of the kundalini, where our attention is not being fragmented in the more gross aspects of natural expression, but instead is starting to work back upwards into a more refined appreciation. In Shakti, and then within that tradition where Shakti is honored, when the awareness has, well, within the tantric tradition, when the kundalini has risen, but if we're going to use it from Samkhya philosophy, when we have worked back to those more refined expressions of nature, of shakti, of prakriti, then we have entered into a capacity to work with the expression of life, work with it, to allow it to unfold. Because what we've done is we've, through exercises, through intention, through continuous realignment of our ideologies, our perceptions, our notions, our ways of engaging, we've managed to disengage with the more gross aspects of nature, and to appreciate how they express at more refined levels. Let me see if I can articulate that in another way. With the chakras, There's a lot of things which are used to define the chakras, colors, sounds, all of these things. But in a very simple way, when you're sitting to meditate, if your attention's up here, you can notice that it gives you the capacity to stay focused, stay sharp. Maybe the next time you're meditating, you can just allow your attention to stay around your belly area. Just stay around there. And you can see how this has a tendency for you to get caught up in more tamasic expressions of nature, that there's a heavier feel. When you raise and elevate your attention up through the, if you want to say chakras, but if you want to just elevate it upwards in the terms of your relationship to where you are internally at a physical level, you can experience a more sattvic experience. So we have the different traditions all aiming to experience union. They seem at cross purposes sometimes in their fundamental ideology. One being a couple which is very distant and cold, and the other one being a very romantically involved couple. It seems that if we were to go to a party with both these couples, it would feel very awkward. And in our practice, that awkwardness, that tension, that almost uncertainty of how we're supposed to bring these two together is a driving force, is something which can propel us and motivate us to not just get complacent and to settle back and say, I know now, I just need to do this. That's what it is. That's all there is. Instead, we're left continuously inquiring svadhyaya, through our own self-discipline of enduring the challenge of it, the discomfort of it, the anxiety that it induces, the not knowing. But we continue with svadhyaya, continue to inquire. And sometimes we have to surrender and let go to the fact we do not know. But it's in the not knowing that the concepts and the identifications and all the things that we're using to give us a sense of we have it all figured out start falling away. And it's in that then that we have the capacity to actually realize something that's true. Okay.